Imagine the screen in front of you says the world ends in 20 minutes, not a metaphor. A military computer, the most advanced your country has ever built, telling you, in giant blood-red letters, that nuclear missiles are already in the sky, already falling toward your home. Every system confirms it. Every protocol says report it. 200 people are staring at the back of your head, waiting for you to say the word that starts the counterstrike, and something in your gut whispers, the machine is lying. This happened. Midnight, September 26, 1983. The man in that chair chose to trust his doubt over his orders. And because he did, you are alive to watch this video. His reward was an interrogation, a demotion in all but name, and 30 years of silence. This is the story of Stanislav Petrov, the man who was fired for saving the world. To feel the weight of that night, you first have to understand something most people never learned in school. 1983 was not just another year of the Cold War. It was the year the Cold War almost stopped being cold. The closest the human race has come to deliberate self-destruction. Closer, many historians now argue, than the Cuban Missile Crisis itself. And almost nobody outside a few bunkers knew it was happening. Start in March. The American president, Ronald Reagan, stands at a podium and calls the Soviet Union an evil empire. Weeks later, he announces a plan for space-based missile defenses. A shield that, in Soviet eyes, means one thing. America is preparing to strike first and survive the answer. In Moscow sits Yuri Andropov, General Secretary, former head of the KGB. A dying man attached to a dialysis machine, ruling from a hospital suite. And Andropov is convinced, genuinely convinced, that a nuclear first strike is coming. He is so convinced that Soviet intelligence has launched the largest peacetime spying operation in its history. Operation Ryan. Agents across the world ordered to count lit windows at the Pentagon, monitor blood banks, track where American leaders sleep, hunting for the fingerprints of an attack being prepared. When you order your spies to find evidence of an attack, they tend to find it. Fear, once institutionalized, feeds itself. Then, on September 1st, 3 weeks before our story, the powder keg gets a lit match. A Korean Airlines passenger jet, Flight 007, strays off course into Soviet airspace, over some of the most sensitive military zones on Earth. Soviet air defense scrambles. Confusion cascades. A fighter pilot locks on, and a missile tears a civilian airliner out of the night sky. 269 people fall into the Sea of Japan. Men, women, children. A sitting United States congressman among them. The world erupts. Reagan calls it a massacre. The Soviets, humiliated, insist the plane was a spy mission, and quietly conclude something chilling about their own systems. Their machines and their men, under pressure, had just mistaken a passenger jet for an enemy and killed everyone aboard. Hold on to that thought, because 25 days later, the machines cry wolf again, and this time, the wolf is nuclear. Now descend with me into a forest south of Moscow. Beneath the pines sits Serpukhov 15, a secret bunker that does not appear on any map. This is the nerve center of Oko, the eye, the Soviet Union's brand new early warning system. A constellation of satellites hanging above the planet, staring at American missile fields, waiting to see the hot flare of a launch. The eye exists because of a terrible arithmetic. A missile from America reaches Moscow in roughly half an hour. Ground radar only sees it when it crests the horizon, eating up precious minutes. The satellites buy time, but buying time has a price. It means the fate of the world rests on machines making split-second judgments, and on whichever human happens to be sitting in the commander's chair when the sirens go off. On the night of September 26, 1983. That human is a 44-year-old lieutenant colonel who was not even supposed to be there. Stanislav Petrov is a strange fit for the job, and every strange thing about him is about to matter. He is not a career warrior. He is an engineer, an analyst, a man of algorithms and flowcharts who helped write the very procedures the operators follow. Where the military men around him were trained to obey the system, Petrov helped build the system. Which means he knows something they don't. He knows it can be wrong. He would say it himself years later. The others in that chair were soldiers taught to follow orders. He had a rule of his own, quietly carried through his whole career. Never trust the computer blindly. That night, he is covering a shift for a colleague. A schedule change. A coincidence. One of the only men in the entire Soviet military psychologically capable of doubting the eye just happens to be sitting inside it. Who is he, this accidental gatekeeper of the species? Born in 1939, near Vladivostok, the son of a fighter pilot who flew against the Germans and a nurse. A boy who grew up taking radios apart to see the truth inside them. He chose the Air Defense Engineering Academy precisely because it was technical, IG, mathematics over marching. For years he worked where the satellites were born, testing, debugging, filing reports on the eye's flaws while it was still learning to see. He knows in his bones that this system was pushed into service before it was ready, because the leadership wanted its miracle now. At home in the closed military town waits his wife, Raisa, and their 2 children asleep. She knows her husband works with computers. She knows nothing else, and by law she never can. Tonight, like every duty night, he kissed her goodbye and descended into a hole in the earth that officially does not exist, to stand watch over the end of the world. The shift begins like 100 others. Tea, checklists, the low electronic hum of screens watching the far side of the world. 15 minutes past midnight, every alarm in the bunker detonates at once. Sirens howl off the concrete, and on the giant wall panel, a single word ignites in huge red letters. Launch. The system is reporting a missile, an American Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missile, rising from a base in the United States. Target, the Soviet Union. Petrov will describe the moment for the rest of his life. His legs went soft. The room felt like a frying pan. But watch what his mind does inside the panic. Because this is the whole story. The screen says, launch. Protocol says the next step is simple. Pick up the phone. Report an attack to headquarters. Let the chain of command. A dying, paranoid leadership already primed to expect this exact moment. Take it from there. Instead, the engineer starts interrogating his own machine. He orders checks. The satellite data is scrubbed through layer after layer of verification. He would later say the system ran its confirmation across 30 levels of analysis. Every level answers the same way. Reliability of the launch detection. Highest. But the eye has one more organ. A human one. In a side room sit the visual operators. Men whose only job is to stare at the raw feed from the satellites. The actual optical picture of the American missile fields. Petrov calls them. Look with your eyes, he says. Forget the computer. Is anything rising off the earth? The answer comes back into his headset. We see nothing. Nothing. The algorithm screams launch with total confidence. And the human eyeballs looking at the same patch of planet see a quiet, sleeping continent. 2 truths cannot both be true. One of them is about to decide the fate of everything. And then the screen changes again. A second launch, a third, a fourth, a fifth. The map now shows 5 American nuclear missiles in flight. And the system escalates its own language. It is no longer reporting a launch. The giant letters now read, missile attack. Somewhere above the Atlantic of Petrov's imagination, 5 warheads are arcing over the pole. If the screen is telling the truth, the first detonations will bloom over Soviet soil in roughly 15 to 20 minutes. Around him, the bunker has become a frozen photograph. Operators standing at their consoles. 200 faces. Some pale, some crying out status reports. All of them, in the end, turned toward one chair. His. Understand exactly what sits in Petrov's hand. Not a launch button. Something in its own way heavier. A telephone. If he speaks the words the protocol demands. Missile attack confirmed. That message rockets up a chain of command with almost no time and every reason to believe it. 3 weeks after Cal 007, in the year of the Evil Empire speech, under a leadership that has spent months telling itself the American first strike is coming, Petrov did not believe the men above him would question it. There would be no time to question it. Retaliation doctrine is built for speed, not reflection. One sentence from this room, and thousands of Soviet warheads begin spinning up toward American cities. And then American submarines answer. And then arithmetic takes over. Hundreds of millions dead in the first hours. Civilization gone by morning, and morning would only be the beginning. In 1983, the two superpowers held tens of thousands of nuclear warheads between them. Enough destructive force to burn every major city on the planet many times over. That same year, scientists were publishing a new phrase for what would follow the fires. Nuclear winter. Smoke blotting out the sun. Harvests failing worldwide. The survivors, as the grim saying went, envying the dead. That is what the phone in Petrov's hand actually weighs. Not 5 missiles, not 2 countries, everyone, everywhere, every future human being who would now never be born, including, in all likelihood, you, the end of the world, waiting politely on one man's next sentence. So the engineer does the most human thing imaginable. He argues with the screen. First, the logic. If America were truly attacking, why 5 missiles? A real first strike is designed to decapitate. Hundreds of missiles, thousands of warheads, everything at once, precisely to prevent an answer. Nobody starts Armageddon with 5. Second, the ground. Soviet over-the-horizon radar should be picking up the missiles as they rise. He calls. The radar crews see nothing. Empty sky. Third, the machine itself. The eye is new. Rushed into service. Petrov knows its childhood illnesses better than almost anyone, because complaints about its glitches cross his own desk. Highest reliability, says the system. 50-50, says the man. He would admit it openly decades later. He was never sure. The odds in his head that night were a coin flip. Minutes are bleeding out. Headquarters is waiting. The sirens are still screaming. Petrov picks up the phone and makes his report. System malfunction. False alarm. No missiles. And then comes the part almost no one talks about. The part that may be the bravest stretch of the entire night. The waiting. Because here is the trap Petrov has built for himself. If he is wrong, there is no correction coming. The ground radars will spot the warheads over the horizon with only minutes left. He has not prevented the end of the world. He has simply decided his country will absorb it in silence. So he sits, phone warm in his hand, eyes on a clock. 1 minute, 5. Somewhere out there, either the night sky over Moscow is about to split open into man-made suns, or a 20 billion ruble system has just been humiliated by sunlight and a stubborn engineer. 10 minutes, 15. He described those minutes with a phrase that needs no polishing. It felt, he said, like being roasted alive on a slow fire. 20 minutes, 23. Nothing. No flashes, no detonations, no end of the world. The screens had lied. The man had been right. Stanislav Petrov slumps in his chair, drains what he later called half a liter of vodka once the shift ends, and sleeps for a day and a half. And think about the walk home. Morning light over an ordinary Soviet town. Buses running, children walking to school. Raisa in the kitchen, asking her husband how his night was. Fine, he says. Quiet. The man has just spent his shift holding the roof of the world up with a telephone. And now he stirs his tea and says nothing, because the law says nothing, and watches through the window a civilization going about its business with no idea how close the film came to simply, cutting to black. Every person on that street owes him everything. None of them will ever learn his name while it matters. Take a breath with him, because you have just watched the single closest brush with extinction that most people have never heard of. And that is precisely the problem this channel exists to fix. The hinges of history that never made it into your textbook. If you were holding your breath through those 23 minutes, subscribe now, not for us, so that stories like this one stop being secrets. Because what happens to Petrov next is the reason this story stayed secret for 15 years. First question: what actually fooled the eye? The investigation traced it to something almost poetically stupid: sunlight. Around the autumn equinox, satellite, sun, and the cloud tops over North Dakota slid into a rare alignment. And high-altitude clouds caught the sun at just the wrong angle. To the satellite's infrared eye, those glints looked exactly like the hot plumes of missiles rising from American silos. 5 reflections, 5 phantom warheads, the most sophisticated surveillance system the Soviet Union had ever built, nearly triggered the end of human civilization. Because of the way sunshine bounced off clouds, the engineers would quietly redesign the system, cross-checking satellites against other data to make sure the sky could never play that trick again. And before anyone smiles at Soviet technology, know that the other side's machines had been crying wolf too. 1979. Someone loads a training tape into a computer at the American Early Warning Headquarters. And for several unbearable minutes, screens across the United States command system show a full-scale Soviet attack in progress. Bomber crews run to their planes before the mistake is caught. 1980. A single failed computer chip, reportedly worth less than $1, floods American screens with phantom Soviet missiles. Twice. The president's national security advisor is woken in the night and told the attack may be real. He decided not to wake his wife, preferring, he later said, that she be asleep if the end came. Different flags, same disease. The most dangerous objects ever built, wired to machines that kept imagining the apocalypse, with humans given only minutes to catch the lie. Petrov's night was not a freak accident. It was the system, working exactly as designed. That is the terrifying part. The machines got fixed. The man got processed. At first, for a few hours. Petrov is a hero. His commander praises him. There is early talk of a reward. Then the institution wakes up and does the math. Because here is the poisoned logic of the situation. If Petrov is officially celebrated for overriding the eye, then officially, the eye failed. The crown jewel of Soviet early warning. The multi-billion ruble answer to America, publicly wrong in its first year of service. Careers had been built on that system. Powerful men had signed their names to it. Reward the man. Indict the machine, and every man behind the machine. Petrov himself would later put it with an engineer's dry precision. If he had been rewarded, someone would have had to be punished for the failure. The system's designers were not going to punish themselves. So the gears turn the other way. The interrogations begin. Not a debriefing. An interrogation. Investigators comb through his every action that night, hunting for the mistake that would make the catastrophe his fault instead of the machine's. They find almost nothing. So they reach for the one thing every bureaucracy can always find: paperwork. In the middle of the crisis, phone in one hand, apocalypse on the screen. Petrov had not filled in the combat log. He answered them with the plain truth. He had a receiver in one hand and no third hand for the pen. It did not matter. The official reprimand lands, not for endangering the world, which he hadn't, but for failing to complete the war diary. Sit with that for a moment. A man holds the fate of every human being on the planet steady for 23 minutes, and his permanent record says, sloppy with forms. There is no medal, no promotion that was once whispered about. The incident itself is stamped top secret, locked away so completely that Petrov cannot tell his own wife what he did. She lived beside him and never knew she was married to the reason the world still existed. Within months, the walls close in. Petrov is shuffled to a less sensitive post. The career quietly stalls, the way Soviet careers did when a man had become inconvenient. In 1984, barely a year after the Night of Nights, he leaves the military altogether. Early retirement, wrapped in silence, and the pressure finds its bill. The man whose nerves held through the scream of the sirens, breaks in the quiet afterward. A nervous collapse. He would say the strain caught up with him all at once. Once there was no longer a reason to hold. He takes a civilian job at the very institute that designed the satellites that had lied to him. And then, as his wife Raisa falls gravely ill with cancer, he gives even that up to care for her. The man who saved the world spends the next decades in a small apartment in a concrete suburb, nursing his dying wife on a pension worth a few $100s, boiling potatoes, standing in lines, utterly anonymous. The world he rescued walked past him every day and never once looked up. And here is the detail that turns this from a close call into a miracle of timing. The danger did not end that night. 6 weeks later, in November of 1983, NATO ran a massive war game called Able Archer, a rehearsal of the procedures for launching nuclear weapons, so realistic that parts of the Soviet leadership began to fear the rehearsal was a disguise for the real thing. Soviet aircraft in Eastern Europe were reportedly readied with nuclear weapons. Intelligence historians now rank those days among the most dangerous moments in human history. Now run the tape again. With one change. Imagine Petrov reports the 5 missiles as real in September, even if the error is caught in time. Imagine the Soviet leadership entering November convinced that American missiles had already flown once. Every ambiguity of Able Archer now reads as confirmation. Every radar ghost as proof. One man's false alarm, believed, would have poisoned the most paranoid autumn of the century. Petrov did not only stop a launch that night, he kept the fear from compounding at the exact moment the world could least afford it. The silence holds for 15 years. Then, in 1998, it cracks from an unexpected direction. Yuri Votintsev, the retired commander of Soviet missile defense, the general who had personally taken Petrov's report that night, publishes his memoirs. And inside them, almost casually, sits the story of September 26, 1983. The world's press does a double take. Journalists track the story to its source and find him, a gray-haired man in Fryazino, outside Moscow, startled that anyone cares. Picture that first knock on the door. A foreign film crew on a crumbling landing that smells of boiled cabbage, asking a pensioner in slippers to please tell them about the night he saved the human race. By then, Raisa was gone. Taken by the cancer in 1997, 1 year before the world learned what her husband had done. She lived her whole life beside the secret and died without ever hearing it from his lips. Of everything the silence stole from him, that may be the theft he felt most. And as the interviews multiply, something remarkable emerges. Petrov refuses, flatly, stubbornly, to his final day, to call himself a hero. He was just doing his job, he says. He was simply the right person on the right shift at the right time. The man punished for his judgment never once inflates it. The honors arrive like guests who missed the funeral era of his life but came anyway. Awards from international organizations, a ceremony at the United Nations in New York, the Dresden Peace Prize in Germany, handed to him in a city that knows exactly what fire from the sky means. A documentary about that night, titled, without exaggeration, The Man Who Saved the World, with Kevin Costner, who reportedly sent Petrov money and thanks simply for having thought before acting. Petrov accepts it all with the same shrug. The prize money helps. His pension is thin. The fame he never learns to want. Visitors describe the same scene for years. A modest flat, strong tea, an old engineer who answers the largest question imaginable. How does it feel to have saved the world? By insisting he never saw it that way. He was, he says, just the man on duty. Stanislav Petrov dies on May 19, 2017, at 77 years old. And here is the final, perfect, bitter footnote. The world he saved did not notice. There is no state funeral, no breaking news. His death goes unreported for months, until a German filmmaker calls to wish him a happy birthday. And Petrov's son answers the phone. The news of his passing reaches the planet he preserved, by accident. Even his exit was quiet. So what do we actually do with this story? Beyond being grateful, look at what faced each other in that bunker. On one side, the machine. 30 layers of verification, highest confidence, absolute certainty, and absolutely wrong. On the other side, a human being. Tired, frightened, 50-50 in his own estimation, armed with nothing but pattern, experience, and doubt. Certainty lost. Doubt saved the world. And that is not a Cold War antique. That is a warning aimed directly at now. At an age handing more and more life or death judgment to automated systems, algorithms, and machine confidence scores. Every one of those systems will, someday, produce its own 5 Phantom missiles. The question of our century is the question of that bunker. Will there still be a Petrov in the chair, with the authority and the nerve to say the machine is wrong? Because notice what actually saved us. It was not a safeguard, not a protocol, not a fail-safe engineered by a committee. Every official layer of the system that night voted for the end of the world. The satellites voted yes. The software voted yes. The 30 levels of verification voted yes. At highest confidence. The only dissenting vote in the entire machine was a tired man's refusal to stop thinking. Strip away the Cold War costumes, and that is the fable engineers and generals still study today. You can automate detection. You can automate speed. What you cannot automate is the willingness to be personally, catastrophically wrong, and to choose doubt anyway. That was never in the code. It was in the chair. One more thing, and then I'll let you go. The institutions of his time gave their verdict on Stanislav Petrov. Reprimanded, sidelined, retired, forgotten. By every official measure of his own country, his greatest night was a filing error. History has since filed its appeal. The reprimand is a museum piece. The system that outranked him is scrap metal. And the name Petrov is taught, honored, and spoken in rooms where the future of automated weapons is decided. Institutions grade you on the forms you fill. Time grades you on the world you leave. He left. This one. All of it. Every city, every stranger, every ordinary morning since September 26, 1983, runs on the unpaid balance of one man's doubt. You didn't know his name an hour ago. Now you can never forget it. And that is the only medal he ever really needed. Before you go, do one thing. Tell one person about Stanislav Petrov this week, not the channel. The man. He spent 15 years unable to speak of that night. So let's make sure the silence never wins again. And if you want the next forgotten hinge of history delivered to you, subscribe and ring the bell. Some of the most important nights in human history happened in rooms with no windows, and we are opening them one by one.